Say hi to Mohnish.
Recording in progress.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, let's get going. Mohnish, it's such a pleasure to have you here at CSIMA, here at the Columbia Student Investment Management Club at the Columbia Business School. And it's a pleasure, really a pleasure to have you. I know many of the students read your books, read about a lot of the things you write, and some of your YouTube videos. And why don't you start, and then we'll get to some Q&A later.
Okay, yeah, it's a pleasure and honor to be with you guys. I always feel at Columbia it's hallowed ground because Ben Graham and the legacy there, and Buffett being a student, etc. So it's always wonderful to be with the students. And in the pre-Zoom era, I used to come to Bruce Greenwald's class, and that was always a lot of fun. And maybe I can just speak for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then maybe we can go to Q&A, just a little bit of a preamble, then take it from there. So I think you guys might have seen in Buffett's letter this year that last year actually that he had mentioned that basically 12 ideas or 12 investments that he made for Berkshire over 58 years were responsible for most of the outcome. And these 12 decisions, one of them might have been hiring Ajit Jain, the Coke investment and Amex and Cap Cities and so on, and Seas Candy and so on. So one of the questions that comes up is, I think over 58 years, my estimate is that Buffett probably made at least 300 or 400 important decisions and investing decisions. And the hit rate, if you will, was basically like 4%, 3 or 4%. And it's a 3 or 4% hit rate for Warren Buffett, which doesn't leave a lot of hope for the rest of us mere mortals. And so the question comes up is why would it take even someone like Warren Buffett to find one good idea approximately every 5 years? And I thought about that, and I think that the 5-year period might actually be almost like a law of investing, law of value investing. And the reason is that for us to get to a conviction level on a particular investment or idea that's going to move the needle means that we have a differentiated view from most of the market. Because if our view was similar to the market, then that would be reflected in the market, and there wouldn't be supernormal results possible. So it's a kind of let's say a differentiated view that causes the outsized returns. And I think the differentiated views, they fall into two categories. They fall into categories where we were delusional which means that we thought that we had a differentiated view, but in reality we were wrong. So we make the investment, thinking, oh yeah, I've figured out something the market hasn't, etc., and this is going to be great, and it doesn't work. So those don't count in his 12 decisions in 58 years, but he may have had probably 1 or 2 dozen of those types of situations where he had very strong conviction, which ended up not being accurate. And the second is that you're actually right on the money, where you got a differentiated view and it ends up that you were right, that that differentiated view caused outsized returns. So I guess and I think one of the things that Charlie Munger used to say was that if they had not been learning machines over that 58-year period, then their record would be a shadow of what it actually was. In fact, nobody would even talk about them. So basically, the knowledge base and information and understanding about the way the world works that they started out with 58 years ago was relatively small and simple versus what they figured out over the years. So to give you an example, Warren made an investment in Burlington Northern Railway. And first he made an investment in the stock where he bought, some portion of the company. And then I think maybe a few years after that, he made an offer to buy the whole company. And they mentioned a few times that they were always negative on railroads. For most of their career, they said that railroads were actually a poor investment. They had very high capex. They were very regulated, unionized, and a lot of inefficiencies. But what happened is that they noticed a few things which caused them to change their mind. So one of the things that happened is the railroads over time basically redid the bridges. They had thousands of bridges. They redid the bridges one by one. So it allowed double stack cars to go underneath them. So instead of having single stack, you could do double stack. And the second is that with diesel costs and all of that, and the railroads also started becoming more efficient in terms of how they were running, the level of employment, the length of the trains, and so on. So basically, a tipping point came where it became a much better alternative to the best alternative, which would have been trucks. And trucks, of course, we have a lot of labor and stuff. They can go anywhere and they can go short distances. But anytime you had to go long distances, then the railroads had an advantage. And both Warren and Charlie said that they were actually late to the party. The guy who runs Bill Gates' money at Cascade Investments actually figured it out a few years before them. And I think even Bill Ackman may have figured it out a few years before them. And so the thing is that to go through this learning about railroads, for example, where you have a view and then you go through a change in that view, that doesn't happen overnight. And that takes a lot of drill down to get to a conviction level and such. So when you look at a 5-year time frame, it could have easily taken them 2 or 3 months or more to really get their arms around railroads. So first they would have had to made a decision that there is meat on this bone, so it's worth studying and it's worth looking at maybe destroying one of our best loved ideas, which is railroads are stupid. And then you go into the rabbit hole of railroads which might be 2, 3, 4 months or something. And there's also a lot of rabbit holes you go down, which end up being dry wells, which is you go down the rabbit hole and there is no meat on the bone and there is no differentiated view, but the time is gone. So basically, if you think about these, 3-month type deep dives, in a 5-year period, you can do 20 of them if you had something to do every 3 months. And, maybe 1 out of 3 that you think is great actually turns out to be great. So if you actually did 20, you might have 3 or 4 that look interesting, and then one is actually a good idea. If we look at their investment in See's Candy, and so See's Candy was a major eye opener for Warren and Charlie, because the only thing Warren did in terms of interfering with management every year was that on January 1st, he changed the prices of all the candy himself. So he would sit down with the See's Candy price list and he would look at the inflation rate and he would like increase it at 2 times the inflation. And what they noticed year after year was that there was no push. Like they'd increase the prices 15% and volumes were fine. Then they increase it another 10% or 15% the next year and volumes are still fine. And it was a huge learning for them. I mean, there was like a huge step function learning for them to really, they were actually in shock that there was no drop in volumes. And actually, if you think about it, so if See's is mostly a California story, right? It's really mostly in California. And in this period from, the 1970s till maybe, let's say 1990, let's say 1970 to 1990, that 20-year period. In that 20-year period, California GDP probably grew at a higher rate than US GDP because it was going through so much growth. Maybe it grew at like 4% a year or something. So the See's volume over that period, and I'm extrapolating based on data that Berkshire's given about how many pounds are sold and all that. Basically, See's volumes from the time they acquired till now has gone up less than 2% a year. In that period from 70 to 90, it probably went up around 2%, like half of California GDP growth. Part of that might have been pushback against these huge price increases Warren was shoving down people's throats along with the candy. Okay. And, but he saw that, hey, I'm pushing this down and it's not declining. And maybe he knew that, yeah, maybe it would have been 4 or 5% growth if I didn't push the volume, if I didn't push the pricing up. But probably in that math equation, it worked better to have higher volumes. And so that learning with this, annual tweaking of See's price list eventually led to the investment in Coke. And I'm pretty sure their investment in Coke was at least 6 months in the rabbit hole. Because, Munger wrote that essay, which is about, how Coke becomes 2 trillion eventually and all of that. But basically, the Coke investment actually took about 2 decades to figure out. So they wouldn't have been able to make the Coke investment in 75 or 80 or 85. It was really in the late 80s when they had enough time screwing around with See's that they actually got a big education on brands. And so Buffett never understood brands at all. And suddenly there was this whole new area of this intangible moat, etc., which was tremendous, and so then he was able to leverage that into other consumer packaged goods and even now the Apple investment. is a brand investment. And so the Apple investment actually is like 40 years in the making, 40 or 50 years in the making. So I just wanted to share that these, you know, it is very much worth going down the rabbit holes because the payoffs are so big. It's also very much okay if we hit a lot of dry wells. That's perfectly fine. You only need to get rich once. And one of these rabbit holes could be a mother lode. And so you don't need a lot of differentiated views on a lot of things. So even like I would say that Buffett and Munger coming up with this 12 differentiated things. I mean, like insurance is a terrible business. It was a terrible business for Berkshire for 20 years, from the mid 60s till the mid 80s, till Ajit Jain showed up. And when Ajit leaves the scene, that business will shrink for them. There is no successor for that business. So they had an anomaly in Ajit Jain showing up. And they had the second anomaly in Geico showing up, which is more branded insurance. And so basically, even that was a situation which took a long time to basically figure out and kind of know what you can do and what's going on and so on. And it worked out. So basically, I think that's really what I wanted to share, is that basically what we are looking for is we're looking for anomalies. And the anomalies are not just, sitting there ready to be given to us on a platter. We have to go into different rabbit holes. We have to decide which rabbit holes may hold some promise, because there's 50,000 rabbit holes to go down. And if each one took, 3 months, that's 200,000 quarters, which you don't have. And so you've got like maybe 100 rabbit holes, or maybe 150 rabbit holes, if you're lucky, that you could go down in a lifetime. And got to make them count. So you don't need to make all of them count, but you need to make some of them count. So those were some thoughts I wanted to share with you about why even Buffett and Munger only had 12 hits in 58 years.
Right. So thank you for the insights. We'll kick off with some Q&A. I think maybe to build up on your thoughts here. I think I read your book some years ago about Dhandho investing, and I think it doesn't sound very similar to kind of the philosophy you are talking about now. And I wanted you to share maybe your view of like how your investment philosophy has evolved during these maybe 25 years.
Well, I mean, I think the evolution I've gone through is I started out in the mid 90s as a Munger-esque great businesses investor. And then there was this mega bubble, the dot-com bubble, 99, 2000. It wasn't just dot-coms, it was tech and a lot of things. In fact, most of my portfolio was tech in the 90s. And I got concerned that these valuations and numbers made no sense. I mean, we had Microsoft at 600 billion and with single-digit billion cash flows, 600 billion market cap, like 70 trailing earnings, like 70 times earnings or something. And I just didn't think that was going to lead to the Holy Grail. And it turned out that that was the case. Microsoft then flatlined for the next 13 years. In fact, it didn't flatline. It was a pretty violent ride, lost a huge portion of its value and then came back. But basically, if you held it from 99 to 2012, you basically had like zero returns. And so in the 99, 2000 time frame, I switched to hardcore Graham. And the reason I switched is because that's where I was finding opportunities. I mean, the day the NASDAQ peaked, I think March 7th or March 9th, 2000, was the day that Berkshire hit a multi-year low. So the Nasdaq hit 5,000 for the first time in March 2000, and Berkshire went down to, like, I don't know, 40,000 or something from 70,000. It dropped a lot. So literally people were selling Berkshire to buy pets.com. That's what was going on at that time. And so basically I thought the great businesses and the tech businesses were very high risk at those valuations. And so I moved to, buying funeral homes at 2 times earnings and steel mills at 3 times earnings and that sort of thing. And that worked really well. And what I should have done in hindsight is around 2012 or 2013, I should have switched back because by then the great businesses, the valuations had come into line. They'd gone through all their corrections and everything. But I had become so comfortable in the wonderful world of Ben Graham that it really, I probably was late by about 5 or 6 years. So I started to make that switch in 2018 or something. And but also in this business, just like I talked about with Warren and Charlie, you have to be a continuous learning machine. And so on a broader basis, I think this is kind of how my journey was, Munger, Graham, Munger, basically that's kind of how it went. But that would be too simplistic. I think also what happens over that 25-year period is that or 30 years almost, is that we learn a lot of things about how things work in many different places or many different industries that we didn't know. So knowledge is cumulative, and so that helps as well. So the Dhandho Investor is, the book is like 17 years old. So clearly I've gone through some evolution since then. And yeah, if I were to rewrite it, then I would have a little different take on it.
Okay, great, thank you. Because I know so many students want to ask some questions, I'm gonna turn the stage to some questions from the students. So we'll start from each block, we'll go this way. So if we have questions from this block, anyone who wants to ask? Huh? Okay.
Mohnish, my name's Chris. It's a pleasure to meet you. I know you're a dear friend of Charlie's, and we're going to miss him a lot. Would love to get your take on the future of Berkshire now that Charlie's not there.
Yeah, I think Warren has said, I think almost the exact quote is that Berkshire has been built to the blueprint of Charlie Munger, and my role has been that of a general contractor. So basically, in effect, what Warren is saying is that Charlie is the architect of Berkshire, and Warren was told what to do, and he executed. And then, he's repeatedly used to say that he would call Charlie the abominable no man, right? Because Charlie would say no to everything. And I think the reason Buffett said that is that there are so many things Warren wanted to do. And of course, he was the senior partner and Charlie was a junior partner. And sometimes the senior partner did things without talking to the junior partner, like the purchase of Gen Re, for example, which was actually did not work well for the senior partner for some time. There was some indigestion. But because the senior partner knew that the junior partner would shut him down most of the time. And many times the junior partner would tell the senior partner, hey, listen, we need to go big on Costco. And, Warren has such an aversion to paying up. And then Charlie would tell him, Warren, some things are worth paying up for. And Warren just still couldn't get them. And I don't know whether you guys have heard the joke. I think this was in the 2011 annual meeting. It's in the footage. But basically, Warren and Charlie come back from lunch, And Warren says, Charlie and I were on this airplane that got hijacked. And Charlie, he's can only see from one eye. So he looks completely over to Warren so he can see him, because the first eye that looks at Warren is a glass eye. So he's completely turned over looking at him saying, he's asking, we got hijacked. So, and then Warren ignores him and say, yeah, we got hijacked. And the kidnappers, we got kidnapped, and the kidnappers made a demand of several $1 million to our families to release us. And the families basically told the kidnappers, look, these two guys basically do nothing. They just sit around and they're like useless. So you can do what you want with them. We're not sending any few $1 million because we'd rather just keep the money. So the kidnappers get really pissed off. And they tell Warren and Charlie that not only are we not getting paid, we're going to lose 2 bullets now to kill you guys. So before we kill you guys, do you have any last wish? So Charlie raises his hand and says, I'd like to speak one more time about the virtues of investing in Costco. Okay. And Warren raises his hand and says, shoot me first. Okay. So we had the junior partner and senior partner, interesting dynamic. And I had a lot of discussions with Charlie about, the dynamic of that relationship. And I told Charlie, I said, Charlie, you are a type A guy. You're not a kind of guy that I see as someone who plays second fiddle to anybody. All your other relationships with business partners, you are definitely the senior partner. You are not only just a senior partner, you are the dictator, basically, pretty much running, calling all the shots. And then here in Berkshire, you're junior. So he said to me, well, Mohnish, it was very smart of me to become the junior partner to Warren Buffett, and so anyway, I think they had a great relationship. I don't think Berkshire would be anywhere near what it is today. It would not even be, in my opinion, 10% of the current market cap, 5% of the current market cap if there was no Charlie Munger. But I also feel that going forward, these two guys are such iconic figures. It's kind of like the founding fathers of the US are gone, more than 200 years back, and the system's still running. All the deadlock in Washington, everything else, the system keeps running. I mean, the country's cranking and everything's at all-time highs and everything else. So I think it will be the culture and the ethos of the place is so deeply entrenched with what Warren and Charlie have put together, what they've preached, what is in the record, written record and videos and everything else, and all the culture and the board and all that I think it's like as close to bulletproof as you can get. So I don't really see any issue with Berkshire in a post-Charlie era. I think the issue they've already faced and they will face in the future is just size. So at some point it'll become a dividend-paying entity or heavy buybacks and so on.
Hi there. You were talking about how we only have so many rabbit holes that we can go down in a lifetime and how we should sort of make them count. And I guess I'm wondering, how do you think about which rabbit holes are worth going down before you go down? How do you start to sort of decide what rabbit hole to go down, knowing that some won't pan out and some will, but you can only choose so many? Thanks.
Yeah, I think the way to do it, the way I've done it, is by being a harsh grader. So most companies I look at, I reject in 60 seconds or less, 10 seconds. There's whole, sections of value line, which is outside circle of competence, So I just take whole bunches and just not interested because I don't know anything about biotech. I don't know anything about pharma. I don't know anything about a lot of things. And so we just, discard those. And if something makes it past, the first minute or first 2 minutes, I'll give it 5 or 10 minutes, right? And then again, the idea is to reject it and move on. So if it makes it past the 5 or 10 minutes, then we say, okay, let's give it an hour. See what's there for an hour. And so basically it's a gradual process where the idea is that the idea is most of them die within 5 minutes. Then what's left dies within an hour, and then what's left dies within a few hours. And so once you've done a day or two of work, a lot of things have gone through your brain about, it's still like, Elton says, I'm still standing. The idea is still standing, So then you say, okay, you're still standing. I'll give you some more time.
Recording stopped.
And you better try to make it work and kind of take it from there. So that's kind of how you. Now, one of the things about different rabbit holes is what is likely to happen with this approach is that you would end up not going down many rabbit holes that would have been very worth your time going down. And that's okay. Like Buffett says, this is a game of no called strikes. So we can let a lot of
Recording in progress.
we can let a lot of balls go by, and we only need to swing at the fat pitch. So if I looked at Google or maybe Microsoft 10 years ago, and even then felt that it was too rich in valuation, which would have been a mistake, and I took a pass, which is probably exactly what happened, not the end of the world. There's many, many more pitches coming at you. So it's okay.
Hey, Mohnish.
So we can see you?
Appreciate you coming by. To kind of build on that question, what red flags do you look for once you start digging to know when to stop? And then secondly, where do you see areas of opportunity today? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the red flags can come from anywhere. Like you have a thesis in your head about why this thing looks exciting, right? And the moment you run into data that is telling you your thesis is completely wrong, then you're done. So and that happens all the time. So, for example, if we take a look at something like the publicly traded car dealerships, which is a rabbit hole I'm currently in. We don't know what the end result's going to be. But basically, there's a view the market has that in the end, the world is going to be all EVs, and EVs don't need much service, much parts and service. And these auto dealerships, these new auto dealerships have something like 40% of their profits coming from parts and service, and that could go away. And the second threat in that space is that EVs could be sold direct. So then what they're making with new cars also goes away. And so if that viewpoint is accurate, new cars not being sold by the dealerships is okay because they only make 4 or 5% of their profits from new cars. New cars are so commoditized, and the comparison shopping is so easy that the margins are very low for all of them. And they don't try to make money there. They know they have to basically just be a service provider there without much margin. So my view on that is that for an OEM to go direct and bypass the dealer, the OEM really doesn't gain much advantage because they have to now service those, folks directly. and that the very small margin that the dealer makes on the new cars is actually being subsidized by other facets of the business. So an OEM going direct may have more than 3-4% in cost to, sell directly. And the second is that, we get to these early adopters and all of that. A lot of people in the end may still want to, have a more kind of brick and mortar experience with how they purchase a car, etc. So, and also some of the new EV players are finding that they're better off setting up a dealer network. So I'm not sure that particular notion carries that much weight, but it doesn't matter that much because the margins are so low. Then the second piece is that, EVs don't need parts and service. And actually, what I found in the deep dive so far is that EVs do need a lot of parts and service. If you take a 20-year life of a car, each EV has like 4 or 5 battery modules. And after kind of 10 years, you might need to replace one or more. If you take out one module and replace it, it's about $7,000. And you're not going to go to Jiffy Lube to do that. You're going to go to the dealership. And there's specialized equipment and there's high margins and all of that. And if a car gets to be 13, 14 years old, it might make sense to change the entire battery pack. The entire battery pack is like 25,000 or something, 25,000. So when you look at the entire, and even EVs or non-EVs, they all need brakes, they all need tires, they all have a bunch of other parts that are still going to be needing service and replacement and so on. So I concluded that actually that's wrong, that I don't think that the parts and service goes away. And then there's a few other aspects to some of these large players, the way they're scaling and optimizing their businesses and so on. And so the valuations of these big guys is based on those assumptions being true, which is that there'll be no parts and service. And in the end, these businesses will cease to exist because everyone will be selling direct. So that causes a differentiation. Now we'll see whether differentiation makes it through the rabbit hole or not. But that's an example of kind of, trying to look at things in a little different way and taking it from there.
Thanks for speaking to us, Mohnish. 50, 70 years ago, when Warren Buffett and his mentor started investing, there was not many people looking at data, looking analytically at what's inside companies. There was a lot of shooting from the hip, looking at the brand. Now there's so much data. Everyone's looking at data, perhaps too much sometimes. There's a massive amount of data. What's the edge you would say that might be out there that we, younger investors, should look into to get that kind of step up or that leg up when against everyone else in the market?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if we go back in history with the U.S. markets, after the crash of 29 to 32, and then also the crash of 38, really stock prices did not even come back to the level of 1932 or 34 till the mid 50s. The Dow was 400 then and 400 in 1954 or something. And so there was a whole generation raised on the notion that, stock market is not a place to make money. And because it did nothing for 2 decades. And of course, those are the types of conditions that set up the best conditions to do extremely well. And the US markets were an extremely good place to invest in the 50s and the 60s until we got to the Nifty 50 and all of that. And then it became a really exceptional place to invest after the 73, 74 crash. But then more recently, I think, things are kind of, you can say, overheated and such. I don't think it's so much an issue of data and what's available. So there's always a bear market somewhere. There's always opportunity somewhere. So if you broaden your horizons, you look at other geographies, you might find wide gaps between price and value, even though in those markets there is incredible data available and incredible speed with which you can get that data and all of that. So Charlie used to always lament to me that we can't find anything to buy and blah blah blah. Like things are, so priced to perfection or overpriced and so on. Um, that is true, but it's not true. For example, with car dealers, the large publicly traded car dealers trade at mid single digit multiples, for example, and of course it depends on whether the differentiated view is correct or not, or whether they deserve to be at that multiple. So I don't think it's so much data. I think it's more being able to. I mean, I would say that it's more qualitative thinking versus quantitative data that is going to give you the edge. And so if you can qualitatively think through different businesses and industries and find some aha moment somewhere, which tells you that something is different here. Like, for example, another rabbit hole that might be worth going down might be something like Delta Airlines. I mean, these top four players have a very good lock. They've got, monopoly, oligopoly type situations in the different airports, and they've got pricing power and so on. So, on the other hand, you've got unions and jet fuel prices and all of that uh, gives you some headwinds. But when you sift through all that, um, should they be worth more? And I don't know because I have not been down that rabbit hole yet. But it might be a good rabbit hole to go down at some point. Try to get a better sense of what's going on.
Hi, Mohnish. Thanks again for your time today. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand you have a pretty significant coal exposure at the moment. Would you mind talking us through the thesis there and perhaps a differentiation between your thoughts on metallurgical versus thermal?
I will mostly duck that question, because I don't want you guys to miss out on all the fun, by not having the joy of going down the coal rabbit hole. But I will just say this, that in the latter half, last 6 or 7 months or 23, I spent about 11 days in various coal mines. Four of the four large US coal players, like 2 or 3 days with each of them, and went like 200 floors underground, about 2,000 feet down. And it was an orgasmic experience. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I was a little sad when it came to an end. But the good news that I'm not done yet. So still have some more mines to go down. And in some cases, it'd be better to go in the summer. So I've got a few more things to do. But besides those 10, 12 days in the mines and with the management teams and miners and all of that, I would just say the miners are the best people on the planet. I just had the most fun time with them. And besides that, I spent about 7 months in that rabbit hole. It was a beautiful 7 months. And mostly it's come to an end because I've, learned what there was to be learned, I think, and such. So, and yeah, I mean, I would say that the rabbit hole you want to focus on between the two would be met coal. So we don't really have a practical alternative to making steel other than through the usage of metallurgical coal. So if we want to have a civilization, we will be mining metallurgical coal. And in my opinion, we'll be mining metallurgical coal for at least 5 to 7 more decades. There are brand new blast furnaces that will be commissioned in different places around the world in the 2030s. And these blast furnaces, which produce iron and steel that use met coal, have a 50-year life. So if we build one in 2035, it's not going anywhere till 2085. It's going to be cranking at that point. So beyond that, I'll leave all the joys and pleasures to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mohnish. Previously, you mentioned that the key component or a key character for an investor is continuous learning. Can you share with us some of your technique or routine when you learn something new?
Well, I mean, I think this is a very random business, we don't really, it's very opportunistic. There's really no game plan, in the sense there's no strategy. I think you just kind of, you're reading, you're looking at different things, and you're looking for an aha moment. So I'll give you an example of an aha moment which led to the 7 months, in the world of coal, is someone put a Twitter post, and they put my handle on the post saying, hey, this David Einhorn bet on Consol Energy looks like Mohnish's IPSCO bet from the early 2000s. Okay. One of the most orgasmic experiences besides coal that I had was the IPSCO investment. And the problem is that these orgasmic experiences don't happen often enough. So I do have to savor them when they happen and make them last. But basically, the IPSCO investment, which I look back very fondly on, is that there was this Canadian steel company, and I think I had made this investment in 2003 or 2004, thereabouts, where they made tubular steel that went into pipelines. And they had given guidance, and they said that for the next 2 years, we will produce $15 a share in free cash flow in each of the 2 years. The company had $15 a share in cash on their balance sheet. It had no debt. And when you added the next 2 years of the $15 cash flow, you were at $45, and the stock was at $40. And so I said, okay, I know this is a very cyclical business. I know that after year 2, that cash flow could go to zero. It could even go negative. But I said, why fill your head with morbid thoughts? I'm going to take a 10% position in this company. And I just want to see how Mr. Market prices this company 24 months from now, when there's $45 of cash on the balance sheet. I just want to see what it does with the stock price. So that's all the analysis that I did on that company. I had no idea what the cash flows would be in the 3rd year. And I made that bet. Okay. And then a year after I made that bet, the company announced that for 1 more year, we will have $15 a share in cash flow. They used to sell their product to people who were, putting up pipelines, and so they would get advance orders. So this was not some, estimate on earnings based on some blue sky, whatever. They actually had actual purchase orders with contracted stuff to be delivered, with margins very well known. That's why they were telling the market. So it was actually set in stone, basically. And so I said, there's a God, it's awesome. And now I'm going to be $60 in cash. The stock had kind of started drifting northwards. I think it had gotten to $80 or $90 by that point. So I'd only held the stock for about 12 or 13 months, and it was almost a double. And I'm thinking, we don't know what happens in year 4. And we're getting 100% return in a year. I think we just sell and move on, ring the register. And while I was thinking through all of this stuff, it had been like 14, 15 months since I bought it, there was an announcement that some Swedish company was buying this company for $160 a share. And so I woke up one morning and the stock said 152 or something. And I'm not looking for the arbitrage. About 10 seconds after that, it was all sold. Okay. So as you can see, I have very fond memories of IPSCO. And I thought IPSCO is one and done, and I'm never going to see this kind of orgasmic experience ever again. And then I read on Twitter last May, that someone is saying Mr. Einhorn with Console Energy, which I've never heard of before, is IPSCO. So I said, let me look into the rabbit hole called Console Energy. It's someone talking about IPSCO, then let's see. So first thing I do is I go to David's 13F, and I see that Console is his largest position, besides the Green Brick or something that he's himself the founder or something, but it's the largest position. So I said, wow, David really loves coal. And then I said, why does David love coal, and why is it like IPSCO? And it turns out that what Console does, very similar to IPSCO, is they forward sell all their production with locked in prices 1 year in advance. Not only, so in the year 23, they sold all of 24, half of 25, and maybe 40% of 26. So it's not exactly like IPSCO. I would like it to be precisely like IPSCO. Like, give me 24 and 25 and give it to me like below the cash or whatever. So the numbers weren't exactly as good as IPSCO. But when I started to go down that rabbit hole, and Console, the thermal producer, so it's not in the met coal business. Met coal is a small part of the business. But I was just looking at it from a IPSCO, mental model point of view, which is, here's a business that forward sells, just like IPSCO forward sells. They have locked in cash flows. Coal is a 4-lettered word. Nobody wants to say the 4-lettered word, much less own it. And no endowment will invest in a manager heavy on coal. You might guess that I have no endowments invested with me. Such is life. Okay. Because I'm not just invested in coal. My 13F has nothing else but coal, which came out actually today. And so I said, okay, this is like a coupon clipping IPSCO bet. I just care about coupon clipping. I don't care about anything else. But what they were doing that IPSCO was not doing is Console was doing buybacks. Now, when IPSCO was sitting at 2 times earnings or 3 times earnings, if you take out the cash, they were sitting at 2 times earnings, basically, with the 2 coming in the next 2 years. What they should have done is bought back every share. And of course, management teams have a really hard time with buybacks. You will hit your head against a brick wall trying to convince them about buybacks. And I don't like to hit my head against brick wall. It's just not very pleasant, So, but I saw that Console was already doing buybacks. And I met them and I became friends with them. I said, listen, the dividend, it's so lame. Why don't you go all buybacks? And next quarter, I see they announced we are all buybacks. I said, oh, they love Mohnish. It's so nice, so nice. And so the IPSCO bet, the Console bet, what I started to do with coal was just to replicate what I did with IPSCO. And then when I was digging into coal, I ran into met coal. And then I started digging into the met coal players, and then that opens up a whole new world. And so that's, I think, like I said, this is a business where there's no strategy. You just go where your nose takes you, and then you just keep going. wherever the rabbit hole goes.
Hi, Monish. Thank you for being with us. I have a question because you mentioned our time is very limited, but we have to balance between breadth and depth. So as a junior investor, do you recommend us to look at a variety of businesses, or do you recommend we should really dig deep into one rabbit hole, maybe like for a month? What do you have for the suggestions for us as young investors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would recommend you be an inch wide and a mile deep. And I would also recommend that the areas that you start with, if you know nothing, day one, zero circle of competence, which of course you are not, but let's assume that's the case. Then you start with the products and services that you yourself use and love. So you're in love with Apple, you can take a look, but I can already tell you that rabbit hole just doesn't have much meat on that bone. It used to, but not now. So you look at all the different parts, products and services you use, what banks you're banking at, and what clothes you're buying, and what food you're eating, and all of these brands they're using. Because for any business to be able to get even $1 of revenue from you, it has to be a spectacular business because you're so discerning. And if they were able to get $1 from you, then they were able to get $1 from many other people. And so I think that's the starting point, because if you're using the product already, you already have a base level understanding as a consumer. And then you go from there, just kind of keep broadening from there. And then beyond that, like Charlie and Warren say, read everything in sight, read things like Value Investors Club, look at the write-ups there, see if there's some write-ups that speak to you, see if there's some write-ups there that look like there's a lot of meat on the bone and a lot of value, and then kind of take it from there. There's a lot of brain power that goes into putting those write-ups together. So, be the shameless clone.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. So, question from this part? Yep.
Hi, Mohnish again. Thank you so much for your time. I have it's like a two-part question. First off, you mentioned that we should, try and go through very few rabbit holes in our lifetime, and that if these rabbit holes pay off, you could probably become rich, and you'll have to become rich once, right? But to do something like that, you probably need to be a little bit concentrated into some of these rabbit holes, sort of like all in. So my first question is, how do you protect for that risk, if the rabbit hole doesn't work out? And the second part of the question is, when you look at an opportunity and you see that there's a long time frame for it to actually pay off, what are those time frames that you work with?
Yeah, so when a first generation Chinese couple decides to open a Chinese restaurant at some corner in Queens or Manhattan, they have gone all in. And they have 90, 95%, maybe 98% of everything they have. Not only are they all in on the money they have, they're all in on all the time they have. And it's not just the Chinese couple that opens a Chinese restaurant. This is the situation with about 10 million entrepreneurs who are running businesses in the US. They are all in. So most of them wouldn't understand what a diversified portfolio is. They've never thought about life that way. And they don't seem to have trouble sleeping at night with all in on the Chinese restaurant. In fact, they're just so tired after a day's work, they just probably have the best sleep of all of us, And so basically, when we look at entrepreneurs, they're not balanced, they're unbalanced. And when we have a portfolio that's concentrated, even if we concentrate, we're still going to have 4 bets. or 5 bets. I mean, I'm not asking you to go 100%. I've never gone 100%. In fact, I'm 10% bets. So I don't even go 5 bets. Usually I'm going like 10 bets. So I don't see much issue with the concentration issue at all. And I'm sorry, I forgot your second question. What was the second question?
Yeah. Sorry, it was just about timeframes. How much time frame do you work with paybacks, or do you expect for it to make sense?
Well, the time frame depends on whether it's your money, other people's money, whether you have an investor base that is going to let you play your hand out, whether you're playing with your own money. I think that all depends on. I mean, an ideal situation is that you get to hold things for a very long time. You've found a great rabbit hole, and you don't need to do anything for 10, 20 years, and it's going to keep. The returns may take a few years to show up, but then they keep coming for a couple of decades, 2, 3 decades. That's what we're hoping to do. So all of you have many things to do and many places to go. And it was such a pleasure to hang out with you guys. And thank you for having me. And sorry for the salty language. Some of that I blame on Charlie because of all the salty language he used to use when I used to meet him. But I tried to keep it clean. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohnish, for your time from the CSIMA Club, and we'll see you sometime soon.
All right. We'll talk later. Bye.
Hi, Mohnish. This is Raghav from your birthplace, Mumbai. Can you hear
All right,
me?
Raghav.
Hi, nice to meet you in person. I met you in Omaha in 2019. We have a photo together. And I actually graduated from Columbia last year. I had a quick question, if you don't mind me squeezing in.
No problem.
So investing is an apprenticeship business. One is fortunate if she or he is able to learn and polish their craft under an experienced investor. But during this journey, how do you think about the right time to sort of start out on your own?
Well, I would say the earlier the better. I think we want long runways. The other thing about the apprenticeship part is you can be like Eklavya. You don't necessarily need to be like Arjun. Eklavya is fine. You can educate your classmates of Eklavya versus Arjun. But the thing is, the body of work that these great giants who've come before us have documented and put forth makes it relatively easy to learn at a distance. And yeah, so I think if we're really serious about the learning, the content is there and the teachers are there, and so that should work out just fine.
Sure, absolutely appreciate it. Do you mind if I just drop you a quick line on your email ID to connect?
No problem. mp@pabraifunds.com.
mp@pabraifunds.com.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much.
All
I
right.
was fortunate to meet Charlie. Yeah, he talked very sort of glowingly about you as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
All right, good job.
This is the biggest event.
Yeah, because mission is extra. There have been a couple of headwinds, like a couple of factors. No, I meant like so one is the multiple issues, and two is like they revamped their product. The market thinks that they had a good product, so like revenue. Yeah, no, 100%. They're getting their existing clients to start using the new product. Well, I need to, right? Yeah, that's where all the time is. And it's a B2B business, so obviously like getting to talk to clients.
Like I usually just go over when I had that's what I also
They just ordered a bunch of so yeah, I guess
it is all actually I'm studying this Oh yeah, you have to back. They don't. It's not. It's never. The variable that you know. Like that is. It
is. I don't know if I'll be racing anytime soon. Yeah, no, this is.
Have you read this really? Yeah. Like literally, like just 20 questions. You just want to make sure that you can say yes to many of those questions. And so that's one part. And obviously, like, get to checks between the two sides.
They're giving us 2 stocks.
You know what they
No, we haven't decided tomorrow.
Okay.
After that.
Okay. So, policy regulations. So I always like anyone who's in business. Yeah, like if you apply to anything, like you know how to say. Exactly. So you just do it that way.
Yeah, getting everything around that.
Because I say like in that room, like
he's the former chief policy officer. So he's also probably one of the
because there's people who are like,
but way I can be a we're connected on that.
Right, yeah, that's the thing, right?
Oh my god, he was great. He taught me a lot. Really?
Alex 太强了，你看那个骄傲了，你们查破了这边只有6个，查破了 CSIMA 只有10个，还得是 Alex。对啊。那个 GCS 的东西怎么搞啊？你在说这个 GCS。
今年争取one thing that is no way you're doing that. But I guess my thing is, you gotta think about they're trying to optimize. Because they want you to do in person, like if you that's that global education. I'm not sure that's My instruments, so I did the instruments. I'm one of the others. I did that. It was another line of so it was only 5 months. So I did that. Okay.
Second year, so our last semester.
So like MF was really there's no way yeah, it works, yeah. But that's like 15 you're not you're part time. You many times
He's also red, I think it's also his last semester. Usually what happens is when you start
yeah, if I graduate, sorry, I can't.
Usually what happens
fine, let's schedule it. And he will understand that because he's here, like he sees that. Or firms that
I take the guest speakers team, events team, whatever. They're always second year. So if you want to be the next one, then what happens is that by April, there's going to be elections for presidency of the next for CSIMA. And they are going to choose VP. So basically, that's the way if you want to get involved for next year. Someone will have to participate.
I love talking. I love it. So is it kind of the appointee of the next person? I will. President of Disney Finance Replacement.
No, you guys, the next president's
Especially in the sense that you will have.
So we don't know who they are yet.
Well, this is related.
It's just that they haven't had.
Oh, they haven't had spiritual opportunity.
Yeah, the whole idea was for the EMPAs, right? To have these arrangements and also have it Zoom.
That's clutch.
And also the ones that are going to come here, the next few weeks, we're going to also have some guests coming in. Because many of them are we're going to broadcast that for the Zoom.
I think that is well received. And so, so what I do, I run an event podcast. I have an executive search firm. I focus on corporate attorneys. The fun thing is that I get to sit up and stuff, so I can see it. Do you know Sounds good. Buffett letters. So the shareholder letters. He's actually a attorney. He's actually he's the chairman of the and a couple of other value. His whole topic is it's different than obviously I don't know what happened. He's here in town. There's a film.
Here we go now.
He's a basically acquire long-term investors. So that's his whole angle. Anyway, we'd love to introduce the speakers if there's any.
There you can see the whole structure of the teams. Then you can get to the event or guest speakers team. You see me, yeah, but they are basically organizing the day, to schedule because some days you can, some days you cannot. But
do you guys typically serve lunch when you do these, or is it maybe?
We try to.
Send it. Yeah, that's nice.
But we need to be smarter, right? You know, in this specific case, people would have come even without, right? So, on the other hand, we got the resources of the car.
It's Tom, right?
Tom?